All right. Cool. I don't mean to be really annoying, but there are a lot of spare seats up the front, and it's quite lonely up the front. So if anyone would like to, could we please fill in the front seats? Given that the topic is very much about community, so we'll just have a couple of moments for anyone to fill in a couple of the front seats. Thank you in advance. All right. Brilliant. Has anyone come from or been to Australia before, by the way? Wow, that's more than I expected. If you have been to Australia, you'll know how arduous the plane flight is over. About 31 hours of feeling like I'm living on a plane, and many, many times of freaking myself out in the bathroom. Trying not to disturb the person next to me, waiting until someone gets up so that I can move into the aisle and wander to the bathroom. And then when I get in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, looking into the mirror and freaking myself out because I look half dead with slobber kind of dried around my lips and my hair absolutely everywhere. But I'm incredibly grateful to be here and incredibly grateful for the weather. I know I will end up slightly orange. My mum is from India, so that's where I get my natural tan. But after a little bit of sun, sometimes I do end up like a nice turmeric orange. And so if you see me in a couple of days and I look quite orange, that's perfectly normal for me. So, who loves movies? Movies. So I imagine many of you have seen this movie, Jumanji, the original. I watched the new one on the plane. But in the original movie, if you haven't seen it and there's nothing else you take away from my talk, please do go home and watch Jumanji. It will change your life. It starred the late and great Robin Williams, which, as many of us know, was an incredible comedian, incredible actor, and who left us way too early when he took his own life. And we have to ask ourselves, why do people like Robin Williams, who are incredibly successful, who are seen to be incredibly successful, why are they taking their lives? And for me, I was sitting on the couch with my brother, eating corn chips, pretty cute, watching Jumanji, when a World Vision ad came up on TV, asking us to sponsor a child. And at 12, that was the first time I'd consciously understood what that ad meant about the state of the world. And so I was whirling around in my head, trying to understand, why is it that we are required to sponsor the livelihood of someone on the other side of the world, when here I am, eating corn chips, watching Jumanji on a comfy couch with my brother. And so I started my entrepreneurial journey at 12. I started up my first company. I started up a number through my teenage years. By the age of 17, I was listed in the top 30 under 30 in Australia. 18, listed again. 19, nominated for Young Australian of the Year, and so on and so forth. And then when I was 19, I was chosen to go to America for a Startup Accelerator program. And the slogan for the Startup Accelerator was "Protect Your Courage." And it was the first time that I was really able to face myself. We sat in silence a lot of the time. We spoke honestly and courageously. And the whole premise of the program was to create a space safe enough for us to be ourselves, to really get to know ourselves, to face some of our shadows and our demons and step into a higher or a better version of ourselves so that we can be more empowered, more impactful as change makers. And it was the first time ever in my life that I'd felt so safe to be myself. Every single word, the question of, will I still be able to belong when I say this? Will I still be accepted when I say this? And fundamentally, will I still be loved when I share this part of myself? All of those questions just weren't as alive in that space. And I realized that my journey isn't so much as an entrepreneur, it was as a cultural entrepreneur, as a cultural facilitator. But I noticed how depressed I was as an entrepreneur, doing, constantly moving to the next, to the next, to the next, and quite successful with many awards, but deep down felt incredibly empty and incredibly lonely. Every weekend, I'd be at a seminar or a business meeting, and my parents would ask me, "Al, do you have any friends? We haven't met them before. You should invite them over for dinner because we'd love to get to know them." And for me, it was just, yeah, I'm just busy. But deep down, there was this deep feeling of actually feeling damn isolated. And that success without friends, well, didn't really feel great. And so the World Vision has said that by 2030, and this is a statistic that drives a lot of my work in the world, depression, isolation, and loneliness will be the greatest contributor to morbidity or death. And I'm sure many of us in the room, just by show of hands, who has experienced or knows someone that has experienced depression before. Yeah, and just have a look around. Great. So many of us have probably seen this before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For most of us, today it probably looks more like this. which is why I've seen most of us trying to connect to the Wi-Fi out there, including myself, to talk to my partner. But actually, it's more like this, because without battery, we don't have access to the Wi-Fi. And so this symbol brings up a lot of cortisol. When my battery gets to about, for some reason it's a bit weird, 69%, I start fumbling for my charger. And for each of us, we probably have a number when we start doing the same thing. But this says a lot. There we go. Here we go. But this says a lot about exactly what we're talking about here. I'm not sure, I'm sure many of you know that text messages, getting a reply, getting a like on Facebook brings up exactly the same, or uses exactly the same neurochemicals as drugs and cigarettes and alcohol, dopamine and serotonin. So when we get a like, when we get a reply, we have these hits of dopamine and serotonin, which is exactly the same neurochemicals that get released when we drink alcohol or when we smoke cigarettes. And so really what we're seeking when we're putting out a Facebook message, waiting for a reply, or feeling a bit lonely and putting out a bunch of text messages hoping that someone would reply, waiting in bed, I've done that before, really what we're seeking is this sense of connection. And so the reason that we're so attached to our digital devices today is simply because they connect us to the world, which is brilliant. We're more connected than ever before, but at the same time, and that statistic tells us, we're less connected than ever before. We have more people than ever before, but we're more lonely than ever before. And so that's a bit of a signal to tell us that there's something very wrong in the way that we have architected our culture, or in the way that we're valuing things more than culture right now. And so this is very much the basis of my work, and I spend a lot of my time working in communities, working with organizations, with startups, creating cultures of connectedness, creating spaces that foster our deep needs for trust, for vulnerability, for belonging, because there is a lot of science showing us right now that these qualities in a team dynamic or in a culture actually lead to higher performance. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. The challenge that I see is that in our desire to forever grow, to become faster, to become more, is that we run the risk of leaving our cultural fabric behind. We run the risk of creating so many great technologies, but the culture behind it not actually being there. And for me, technology without culture is very similar to a person without identity, a person without a personal character, or a person without soul. And it looks something like this, which looked exactly the same as the picture I put up for depression before. That technology or a world without culture feels empty. And for us, a life without meaning, a life without tribe, a life without connection feels empty. And so there's a great correlation between the way that we structure and the way that we facilitate culture and society and our social architecture and the mental health crisis that we're facing at this very time. And so what we need is cultures that are ambidextrous. Cultures that are both lean, agile, high-performing, future-oriented, and also fostering a sense of tribe, fostering a sense of growth, fostering a sense of purpose. I'm sure there are many of us who either have played a video game in the past or do play them. I have a mentor who went to a tech addiction rehab center in the UK to study for his book, which is about the power of connection. And so he interviewed a bunch of teenagers, usually between the ages of 14 and 19 years old, to see what it was that had them play multiplayer role-player games so often. And he found that it was these three things: a sense of tribe, so a sense of being connected to others; a sense of autonomy, so having the freedom in this online world to do whatever they like and to experiment, to express; and a sense of purpose, a very clear aim, a very clear goal. The other thing that's not up there was a sense of competency or growth. And so to be able to have a very clear feedback loop to show that we're growing, we're becoming more, we're learning new skills. And so these game players are going to games to fulfill the core desires that our culture is not at this time. And I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm just saying that this gives us a very clear signal, like a canary in a coal mine, that there is a bit of a fault in the way that we're structuring our society and our cultures, our cultural fabric. And so we need cultures that are ambidextrous. And the idea of both and, not either or, there's been a lot of conversation about the software changing, the mindset, the paradigm. And I'd say that up until now, hopefully up until today, we've been in a paradigm of either or, this very binary paradigm. You're either a man, you're either a woman. You're either good, you're either bad. It's either tech, it's either culture. But evolution happens by including the previous and adding another layer. That's why things become more complex. That's why we started with single-celled organisms, and we've become more and more and more, because it always includes the previous and adds another layer. And so the next layer is that it's both and. It's not just tech, it's not just culture, it's both together. And they are incredibly, they incredibly rely on each other and need to coexist. And so we need to have cultures that are not just lean and agile, but also cultures that foster this sense of purpose, this sense of belonging, and this sense of growth. So how do we do that? In the time we have left, I really wanted to focus on our low-hanging fruit, or the opportunities we have. And the great thing about culture and how we create culture is that it's right here in front of us. Actually, it's right here inside of us. It's something that doesn't require us to reach out there and develop a new technology to create. It's something that we can create moment to moment in between the space of you and I. And so it's important to recognize that a community, a society, an organization, a family unit is just built up of individuals, of individual humans. And culture is simply a series of interactions. The quality of those interactions determine the quality of the culture. We can have a culture where the interactions are a bit competitive, where the interactions are based on ownership and the need to own so that we have a one-up on everyone. And that will determine what the quality of that culture is. Or we can have a culture where the interactions are built on shared ownership, shared understanding, empathy, and scale that up to an organization, and that is the culture of the organization. And so I ran a series of workshops with Telstra, which is Australia's big telecommunications company. And it was a bunch of men in a room, basically, with high-vis jackets on. It was the engineers for the NBN, which is the National Broadband Network in Australia. And so they were very apprehensive to come into the program because we were going to be talking about vulnerability, we were going to be talking about emotions, we were going to talk about feelings. And these were Australian men in high-vis jackets coming to sit in a circle. And my manager always briefs me when I get a briefing for a new engagement, always briefs me just to remind me. They say, "El, I know you're not going to do this, but this is a group of men from a telecommunications company sitting in a circle and singing Kumbaya. It's probably not going to work." But I always like to push people's barriers, and so we sat in a large circle. We didn't sing Kumbaya, but we started by meditating. We started by talking about a challenge that they were facing in their lives at the moment. And of course, there's a lot of apprehension. There was a heckler in the room that said, "This is great, El, but when are we going to take our clothes off?" And started to have a joke about it. And I just told him that that comes a little bit later on. But for now, we're just going to start here. And we created a space where if we were out in the forest, the only things you would be able to hear were the whispering in the trees. But we weren't in the forest, we were in the damn boardroom. So all you could hear was the traffic outside. But we created a space of stillness, of silence. A space that enabled everyone in the room to meet themselves, to notice their own subconscious bias, to notice their own apprehension, to notice their own discomfort. And only when they could meet themselves, only when they could notice all of their judgments and all of their subconscious bias, were they allowed to talk to another. And then we started to open up into the circle to talk about what are the challenges in our culture and our dynamic as a team right now. And the things that came up were incredibly profound. And the lead at the end said that he felt that the most important work that they'd ever done happened that day. Yet we were doing what most of us have a lot of trouble doing, which is nothing. And sitting in stillness, sitting in presence, sitting in silence. Because only when we do that, only when we take a step back, we do meet ourselves. When we're too busy trying to answer that message, follow up with that call, we're so much out there that we can never truly meet ourselves. And when we never meet ourselves, how dare we try and meet another? And how on earth are we meant to truly connect with another person? And so that day, in a way that was, yes, very uncomfortable, they had the most profound engagements, the most profound conversations, and came up with decisions, so things that were very critical to the operation of their culture. And so for us, our opportunity, our low-hanging fruit, as individuals, as leaders, as we go back into the world, is to ask ourselves in every moment when we're interacting with somebody, what story am I telling? Am I telling the either-or story, that we need to have a conversation more about productivity, more about growth, more about the future? Or am I truly being present and meeting myself before I meet them? Am I truly being conscious in how I'm relating to this person to create a space safe enough for them to not have the question of, will I still be loved after I share this? Rollo May said that ultimate freedom is in the pause between stimulation and reaction. If we don't create a pause, we're constantly in these cycles, and we constantly get what we've got. But the pause is what creates the opportunity. The pause is what creates the option to choose, either this way or that way. And so my invitation for you is, for the next couple of days, if we can't practice this here, in this brilliant container that Catapult has created for us, if we can't practice this here, how on earth are we going to create it back out there, with our family, with our loved ones, with our teams? And so for the next couple of days, when we do meet somebody else, really take a moment to meet yourself first, to notice, am I truly creating a space that is telling this person this conversation is much more important than that text message, or much more important than that email? And so we're going to practice. For the next minute, we are just going to sit in absolute silence. But before we do that, we're going to make as much noise as we possibly can and have everyone out there wonder what the hell's going on in here. So I'm going to start with my hands close, and you're just going to start clapping really softly. My hands are going to become wider. You clap really, really loud, really, really loud, and then they're going to become softer again, softer, softer, softer. When my hands reach the middle, we just sit in silence. All right, and if you'd like to, I just invite you to close your eyes and just ask yourself, just meet yourself now. All right, and just notice what apprehensions, what internal monologue is going on. So are we ready? Are we ready? Yes. Thank you. All right, starting nice and soft. You ready? Louder, 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 louder. Woo! Cool, and just closing your eyes. And as you take your attention inwards, just meeting yourself. Noticing maybe the rise in body temperature, heartbeat. And maybe just taking a moment to ask yourself, what's one thing you'd like to do different when you're in conversation with somebody else? What's one thing you can do to help create a space for vulnerability, for connection? And then just taking a deep inhale, bring your shoulders up towards your ears. Exhale out the mouth. And just gently blinking open your eyes. Brilliant. So I just want to end with this quote, which is that there's no way to community, community is the way. Yes, it's important to think about what we're doing, but it's also, not more, also important to think about how we're doing what we're doing. We can be building technologies to create a more connected, a more empowered future, but if in the way that we're doing that, we're not being empowering, we're not being connected in our team environment, in our family, in our relationships, what are we doing? The future is out there, the present is here, and we have a choice to actually presence the future, to bring our future into the present moment in the very way that we be moment to moment. And so the invitation is to be aware of that, because I truly believe we can create a future society that's thriving, but it's going to require our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our sisters, our brothers, our aunties, engineers, architects, everybody at the table. And everyone won't feel safe enough to bring their piece to the puzzle unless we create spaces that are safe enough for them to speak up, unless we create spaces that are psychologically safe for people to feel like they can bring their gift to the world. And so I feel that we need a sense of modern tribe. We need cultures that are ambidextrous. We need cultures that nurture human expression so that we can truly create abundance. Thank you.